We discuss things.
We are discussing. God, what I'm gonna ask you the question. Have you seen?
Don't you dare do that.
Please don't do that. No, troll.
Oh, please don't. You would do that too. I'm like, oh my God, don't. So
It's a
much.
trap.
I'm just right up to myself. Oh shit, I was here.
Whenever you speak into the mics, just make sure to speak directly into them. Okay? Elizabeth, whenever you speak into the mic, just make sure to speak directly into it so the live stream will pick up.
I'm gonna be serious now.
Like this? Like, oh, it's very,
It's heavy, right?
yeah, but I feel like I'm in the United Nations.
Oh, yeah, so very.
Welcome, everyone. Hello. Thank you so much for coming out on this wonderful New York night. Welcome to the Center for Black Visual Culture. I'm Kira Joy Williams. I'm the program manager for the center. Thank you. Welcome to our first event of the spring semester. And also, happy Black History Month.
Oh, yes.
We're very excited to be celebrating Black stories with you tonight. I am up here for a very short time because I wanted to grab the honor of introducing Dr. Deb Willis, the director of the Center for Black Visual Culture and also the chair of the Department of Photography and Imaging at the Tisch School of the Arts. So Dr. Deb will welcome Joan and you all and our special guests, and then we'll get started.
Thanks so much, Kira. It's really wonderful. Kira is her first program as, no, I don't want to hold it, right. Her first program as program manager. And it's wonderful to see all of you here. And I understand we also have people online somewhere. Is that correct? Right. It's really, I'm really happy to be here. I am a big fan of both people here on the table. I've admired work for a long time. What we have experienced with the Center for Black Visual Culture is thinking always about storytelling and how do we retell stories through the visual experience, specifically through a narrative that is formed by a woman's story. And this is really exciting to have these two together. When Joan and I and Kira decided to organize this program, we began to think about how to think about graphic novels, but also how to pull together two people that could create a narrative that's really exciting, but also the experience of the mystery of the night and the mystery of the spirit. And so I want to say thank you both for being here and welcome Joan Morgan, who is our director.
I want to welcome everyone today and thank Dr. Willis and give a special thanks to Kira for making the print on my script extra big. Because of course I'm fishing around for my glasses and I don't know where they are. It is a real honor to have you both here, to be able to open the semester this way, particularly with this focus on narratives about women, and a narrative that is, I mean, Kindred is, Octavia Butler is one of our treasures, and it took a very, I'm sure John will tell you this, but it took a very, very long time to secure the rights for this story to be told visually. And Queenie, most of us remember her as a footnote in a film that's really all about the men. So I want to thank you both personally for this work. So I am Dr. Joan Morgan. Thank you, Dr. Deb. Hello to everyone. And welcome you to here at 20 Cooper Square, where we're being hosted by the Center for Cultural Analysis, and we are streaming out to you across the internet. Our special guests are Elizabeth Colomba and John Jennings, and we are ready to celebrate the launch of Elizabeth's first graphic novel, Queenie, Godmother of Harlem. This story is of Stephanie St. Clair, AKA Queenie, who became the only Black woman to head up the numbers game in Harlem in the 1930s. Now, some of you are too young to remember the numbers, but those of us of a certain age, the numbers is definitely a daily part of Black life. You know, at some point during the day, someone wants to know what the number was. Before we started doing things like lotto. Elizabeth Colomba was born in France and raised in Épinay-sur-Seine.
Yes.
Okay. From parents of Martinician descent. She lives and works in New York City. Elizabeth received a degree in applied art from the Estienne School of Art in Paris and also studied at the École Nationale Supérieure des Beaux-Arts. My French is not good, so I'm hoping I didn't butcher that. Colomba's paintings have been exhibited at the California African American Museum in Los Angeles, the Balthus Grand Chalet in Switzerland, the International Biennial of Contemporary Art, BIAC, in Martinique, Volta, New York, the Fondazione Biogiatti Borghetti Arte in Florence, and the inaugural triennial at Columbia University. The Moon is My Only Luxury was the artist's first solo exhibition and catalog in New York, which opened in the spring of 2016. Her work is included in the permanent collections of the Studio Museum of Harlem and Princeton University. You can learn more about Elizabeth on her website, www.elizabeth-colomba.com. John Jennings is my friend and a professor and author and graphic novelist, curator, and Harvard Fellow, and a New York Times Bestseller, a 2018 Eisner Winner, and 2021 winner of the Hugo Award for his work on The Parable of the Sower, graphic novel adaptation with creative partner Damian Duffy. As professor of media and cultural studies at the University of California, Riverside, UCR, Jennings examines the visual culture of race in various media forms, including film, illustrated fiction, and comics and graphic novels. He is also the director of the Abrams Comic Arts imprint Megascope, which publishes graphic novels focused on the experiences of people of color. His research interests include the visual culture of hip-hop, Afrofuturism and politics, and visual legacy, horror and the ethno-Gothic, and speculative design, and its applications to visual rhetoric. Jennings is the co-editor of the 2016 Eisner Award-winning collection, The Blacker the Ink, Constructions of Black Identity in Comics and Sequential Art at Rutgers, and the co-founder and organizer of the Schomburg's Center for Black Comic Book Festival in Harlem. He is the co-founder and organizer of the MLK NorCal's Black Comics Arts Festival in San Francisco, and also CamCon? Okay, at the California African American Museum. You can learn more about John at johnjenningsstudio.com. At the end of our presentations, there will be time for an audience Q&A. For anyone who's joining via the live stream, please put your questions in the chat and we will pull them as they're entered. So this is really important for those of you who are not sitting in the room. If you put your questions in the chat, there's a good chance that we're not going to see them because we're not looking at the chat like that. So make sure and put your questions in at the Q&A section, and you can put them in at any time during the talk. You may purchase Queenie, Godmother of Harlem, and get it signed after the discussion. We have John's graphic novels adaptations of Parable of the Sower and Kindred available for purchase here as well. I think John will be willing to sign a few if you'd like him to. And these are all courtesy of Abrams Books and the NYU Bookstore. And while I am up here, I want to thank the NYU Bookstore for their cooperation and help and working so beautifully and expediently with us on our events, so thank you. And this event is co-sponsored by the 370J Project and the Department of Photography and Imaging at NYU's Tisch School of the Arts. And now, without further ado, Elizabeth would start us off by telling us about her artistic work and the visual interpretation of the story of Godmother of Harlem. And there's still plenty of open wine and food, so please feel free to get up and help yourselves. because we're not taking it home with us. Okay.
Well, hello, everybody. Hold on. Oh. Thank you for coming. Thank you for people are tuning in through the internet. Oh, this like this. Can you hear me now? Oh, that sounded like a commercial. Okay. So, I want to first set up my practice, the idea of it. Oh gosh, no. Oh gosh, what's happening? We're good. So as a painter, so my main work is being a painter, I separate my work in 4 parts: mythology, allegory, and history, and feminine sacred. And I'm going to focus now on the historical part so that you can understand why I was interested in talking about Stephanie St. Clair, and why also I chose this new medium to explore her life. Oh my God. Okay. So so again, my historical part, I'm talking about women of color or people of color that I feel have been overlooked by history. And B.D. Mason is one of them. B.D. Mason has an extraordinary story. I'm going to try to make it quick because it turns out I have 10 minutes to say the whole thing. So, you know. So she's a woman, she was born enslaved in 1818 or 1815 in Georgia. She was incredible. She happened to be specialist of, medicinal herbs. She was a midwife. And she was also, she's supposed to have 3 kids with her owner. So her owner was from Mormon faith. And he decided to push towards Utah. So he decided and she followed, to cross from Georgia to Utah. She had to walk behind the carriage with her 3 kids and still taking care of the whole household. When they arrived in Utah, he decided to push towards California. She knew a lot of people there, and she understood that California was a free state. And when she arrived in California, if you arrive there and you stay 2 years, you are automatically free. So 2 years passed. I'm passing on the details, obviously, but 2 years passed, and then she said, later, to the owner. And he was not very agreeing with that. He said, well, let's push to Texas, and when I go to Texas, we all go to Texas, and I will free you there with your kids. And she's like, no, thank you. So what happened, she sued him. He didn't show up to the trial, and she became free automatically. After that, she established herself in LA and established a business with the help of a doctor there and she started to make medicinal herbs and sell everything and established a practice with him, and was a midwife. So within a few years, she saved enough money to acquire a plot of land in LA. And throughout the years, she basically owned the equivalent of downtown LA today. She resold everything and became a millionaire. And with that, she decided to help a community, open a church, open childcare, and helping everybody regardless of your faith and color. So extraordinary woman. So I felt like this person needs to be known. Then I'm going to talk about lore. So you might be familiar with the Olympia of Edouard Manet. So Edouard Manet had one of his favorite model was Laure. And in this painting that you see, and for people who are on the internet, please Google the Olympia. You see there is a woman in the background, there is a black woman whose name is Laure. And we kind of never knew her name, and thanks to Denise Murrell, who is now a curator at the Met, who did a whole a show about her, we find out her name, and it was not that difficult to find, to be honest with you. It's just people didn't pay attention. So I wanted her to be center stage in a painting, so I decided to dedicate my whole work to her, and it's basically her going to Manet's studio, on her way to Manet's studio, so the setting is Paris, and you have some clues on how to find who we're talking about, because you have the cat in the painting that you can find also in Manet's painting. You have the man in the carriage carrying the flowers that you see on the painting. So it just defines who she is. She's wearing the same dress. She has the same headdress. Basically, it's her. So another woman I wanted to highlight. Uh-oh. Oh, my God. Oh, there you go. There we are. And now, Stephanie St. Clair, the hero. So I stumbled about it. I mean, I didn't stumble. My mother told me about Stephanie St. Clair years ago. And she is from Martinique. And she moved to Harlem in the 1910s. So I find some sort of a kindred spirit in a way, even though I'm not a criminal. But because I'm from Martinique descent, my parents are from Martinique, and when I moved to New York, I established myself in Harlem, and I still live in Harlem today. So, no, some Harlemites here. So there was also something immediately intriguing about her, and the way she presents herself. As you can see, she's wearing, full fur, jewel, turban, like she is, a fashion icon on top of being, a badass, if I may say. So, so she became the. Oh my God, what is this? What's happening here? Oh. I'm sorry, I have some technical problems. So she became the head of the illegal lottery. So you see on the screen extract of the book, which kind of explains how you were running the numbers at the time, a numbers operation. And she had so many employees. It was a real enterprise, maybe like 40 people, I believe. And she was managing a lot of money, and the partner that she had was Bumpy Johnson. I'm going to. Oh, so first, before we talk about Bumpy Johnson, I guess I'm going to talk about, thank you, her activism, because on top of being the head of the mafia, she was also a civil rights activist. So what you see in the middle here is an ad that appeared regularly in the Amsterdam News, where she bought pages and she put herself, she decided to have a portrait taken in full regalia and talk about civil rights of a community, what the police denouncing police brutality, talking about who was taking bribe, even though she was paying the bribe, but she was also noting the names and denouncing them. I know, it was a lot. And doing all this, basically putting herself in clothing that for her exuded power, because it exuded money and wealth, so it means that it was powerful at the time. Yes. So I also highlight in the book that she comes from Martinique, so everything that you see in kind of this grayscale talks about, her flashback, and we understand what kind of pushed her to become that woman, what made her to come to New York and explore that avenue, if I may say. And her partner is Bumpy Johnson, so we mentioned that the footnote that she was in the movie Hoodlum, and we always talk about him, but if it was not for her, I don't know if there would be a Bumpy Johnson, because when he came out of jail, she basically took him under her wings and basically formed him to this racket business. I'm going too fast. What's happening? And her nemesis is Schultz. So Dutch Schultz was a cruel man, very known, and also was interesting in the numbers game, but he was mainly making this money with the prohibition. And the way we set up the story of Queenie in 1933 is because it was the end of the prohibition. And then he became interested in Harlem businesses because he understood they were making a lot of money. And because they were lacking money into selling alcohol, he decided, well, why these people are making so much money and I'm not a part of it. So a lot of the numbers, a lot of the men had to relinquish a part of their business to Dutch Schultz. But Queenie decided, I am not going to do that. I'm going to fight for my business. and it's going to be my way or the highway. So basically, Dutch Schultz became her nemesis. And I will add that when he died, in circumstances that you can find in the book or on Google, she sent him a telegram, and then which basically said, "You reap what you sow." She was ruthless. And so I just wanted also to give you an idea of what it is to make money with the illegal lottery. She was making roughly $100,000 a year, which at the time, I know, it sounds like a lot, but imagine the president was making $75,000 a year. Oh, okay, thank you. No, yeah, you good, yeah. Thank you for letting me know. Of course, her business became very lucrative, but also interested people who decided that a woman, and certainly a black woman, could not make that money and shouldn't make that money. And that's why they tried to steal the money from her. So, to conclude, Queenie, the Godmother of Harlem, is available to you. If you want to know more, let me know, and through the Q&A, and hopefully it will be very intriguing. Thank you.
Oh, dang it. We didn't even, okay. Hello. I'm going to go over. I'm sorry. I have 3 times the amount of slides. So I'm so sorry in advance. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Deb Willis and Dr. Joan Morgan for bringing me out here, the 2 of my sheroes, and I'm very, very grateful. I love y'all so much. And I also want to thank Abrams family in the back, too, for coming to support. So I entitled this really quick talk, Historical-Futurist, the Graphic Legacies of Octavia E. Butler. Historical-Futurist is a term that actually comes from Octavia Butler's own papers. There's a paper by Shelley Strebe, Dr. Shelley Strebe, that finds out that in Octavia Butler's notebooks that she actually called herself this, right? The idea, and this is something that comes a lot from Afrofuturism, to the idea of Sankofa, reaching back to get it and pull forward this idea. And even though she didn't call herself an Afrofuturist per se, she was still, like, I think, espousing some of the ideas. And I think actually even has some interest in becoming getting her doctorate in history. Whenever I talk about working on her work, it can't be overstated how important Octavia Butler's work is to not only to science fiction and fantasy, but to like black culture. As far as like graphic legacies go, I mean, she was a pioneer in a lot of different ways, and almost every way. Without her, we don't get writers like Nnedi Okorafor or Nisi Shaw or Nalo Hopkinson, Tomi Adeyemi, and the list goes on and on. As far as like just representation itself, I mean, she's an icon. So this particular piece here is it's like a declaration of her own ascendancy, so to speak. And one of my favorite parts of it is that she kind of speaks herself into existence. She says, "I'm going to do this. I'm going to be on the New York Times Bestsellers list," and so be it. See to it is what she says, right? Now, what's really interesting about it is that me and Damian would have conversations about this particular piece, but we actually got a chance to go to the Huntington Library where her papers are, and it was humbling to be in the same room as this artifact, because this is what this is, an artifact of a person willing themselves into the life that they wanted for themselves. As far as like Kindred goes, which is a very difficult book, time travel narrative about a young woman who's in an interracial relationship in the 1970s who is inexplicably transported back through time. Came from a discussion that she was having with some of her peers, and she said that she was trying to get people to actually feel what it was like to be in slavery, right? And if you read the book, if you interacted with the graphic novel, you know that is exactly what we're trying to do, the visceral space, that we were trying to create there. Now, as far as like some of the themes that she deals with, which are many, I remember reading one time that Octavia Butler said that she had 2 major fears. One was that mankind creates hierarchies, and the second was that mankind always wants to be at the top of that hierarchy. And so that's a lot of the tensions that's in her book. I mean, in her book, she's critiquing various modes of power from various standpoints, not just about like race or gender equity, but power itself, the constructs of power. The other thing that she does, of course, is her protagonists are primarily women, right? Primarily women, right? And that's an extremely, I think, wonderfully brave thing to do in a genre that is so dominated by particularly white men, as far as like science fiction and fantasy. Again, willing herself into this space, right? And by centering black women, she also pulls along this idea of like black culture and really interrogating aspects of what it means to even be a black woman that's be alive in these different spaces, right? The other thing that she was doing was archiving history for the future. From what I can tell, whenever she researched a particular topic, she almost becomes like an expert in the thing that she researches. One of her graphic legacies, if you've ever got a chance to go to the Huntington, thousands and thousands and thousands of papers that she has spent so much time with, to the point where she almost like is imbibing the knowledge, through what she was writing. It's incredible to see, I got a chance to see just her, just a little bit of her work, just the reference materials that she went to, the things she studied, botany, molecular biology. It was insane. It was like wonderful and so like beautifully obsessive as a writer. She wanted to become an expert in that thing. So she was archiving the history, right? The other thing too is that she would explore these ideas of identity constructs, right? A lot of her characters were mutable in nature. So for instance, you look at a character like Doro from Wild Seed, a being that's thousands of years old that could literally live inside of different people's bodies, eschewing a physical space, right? Or in his, I guess, lover slash antagonist, right? Anyanwu, right? Was a shapeshifter, could control every aspect of her molecular body, right? Can look like anyone, anything. For a long time, she lives as a dolphin in the sea, right? Really, really wonderful ideas of like how do you actually like break outside of these constructs. The other thing too is that I don't know if she called it this, but when I look at her work, I think about design fiction. So a design fiction is like it's a technology. It's using the story as a technology where you're actually examining different types of areas of interest through the critical making, right? So for instance, the idea of the diegetic prototype is something that's part of the design fiction. And what I mean by that is like an object that has been created to have a conversation, right? If you look at, say, Kindred, in that particular book, the diegetic prototype is the family Bible that actually has all of the lineages that Dana, actually, in this particular character, in this particular book, is actually interacting with. This is the thing that actually like sets everything in motion, this family Bible. In Parable of the Talents, it's the dream mask. The dream mask is a prototype that she uses to explore these past histories, to explore these stories through again, imbibing them through the body. And the last thing is the idea of the epistolary and the history of the future. So the epistolary, of course, is a form of writing that actually uses letters from various standpoints. A classic example is Dracula, which is a series of letters that are written to each other, the characters in the book. What it does, it gives you a sense of reality. It grounds you in a particular type of reality. If you look at, say, Parable of the Sower, the epistolary is, of course, the book of life, the writings of Olamina as she's traveling and actually building this religion of Earthseed. She's actually writing herself into existence, but also creating this religion right in front of us as well. And you have these ideas of like shadow books inside of it too. Another classic example, of course, is Kiese Lehman's Long Division, where Long Division is actually a book that doesn't exist, that is actually inside of the meta-narrative, right? Or The Intuitionist by Colson Whitehead, where there's a book called Theoretical Elevators that is being sampled throughout the book. So she was a pioneer in using these types of ideas around writing. Okay, so that was it. So how much time I got? 5 minutes. Oh, perfect, okay. So I can go through the rest of these 40,000? No, I'm just kidding. So this is more about process, right? So the first Kindred, the first graphic novel was an experiment in self-torture. So, because what was happening is, as Damian was actually like going through the process of creating the script, Damian read Kindred, I think, maybe 14 or 15 times, therefore, because he didn't want to leave out a single word, right? The other thing that happened is that as he was doing this, he realized that as soon as you start adapting something, you change it. I mean, the word adapt kind of literally means to change, right? The affordances of comics are very different than the affordances of novels. And so once you realize that, you're actually translating one particular type of storytelling to another type of storytelling, which means you have to get rid of some things. Some things have to be compressed. Some characters actually have to be reimagined, right? The other thing is that Kindred is actually a lot more complex than you think. It's not really connected to the rest of her mythologies, like Xenogenesis and all these different projects. It's self-contained. There are times in the story where Dana travels back to, that she mentions in the present, and you have to account for those things. And so when you start to pull it apart, Damian starts to realize, like, oh my goodness, how complex it is. The other thing that we lost too, and this is something that's really, really remarkable, in the novel, you don't realize that Dana is black until the second chapter. Now in a graphic novel, you know she's black, because she's right there in front of you. Now, can you imagine that? So that's when it becomes a horror story. We wanted Bram Stoker for this book for a reason. So imagine that. So the first time that you realize that is in the second chapter is called The Fire, when Rufus uses the N-word. And you're like, wait a minute, she's black? You need to run now. You're in danger, girl. So anyway, so that was amazing, right? The other thing is like going through all these iterations of like, how do you actually make this book? So here's some character sketches, and these are just going to be like process-oriented things. And I don't want to take up time because I want to, talk to my wonderful colleague Elizabeth, but also field questions from you. So these are just process images. Now, Kindred was actually done with Sharpie. It was actually, I wanted to use a medium that was unwieldy on like typing paper, so it would bleed through. It was doing this really crazy things, and this is like one day of work. It was like 33 pages of inks, and I would get up in the morning and I would work from say like 11 o'clock in the morning to like 3 o'clock the next day, that kind of thing. The smell of Sharpies wafting through my studio. My wife, all three of them, were coming to the studio because I was obviously hallucinating from like Sharpie. I was like, one of y'all are talking to me, And so the other thing that happened is that scanning. We were on such a tight deadline that scanning was out of the question. It actually slowed down the process. So how many people are familiar with a stat camera? You know what a stat camera is? Deb knows because Deb is awesome. All right. So basically what I did is I actually turned myself into a stat camera. I actually stand over the artwork and take a picture of it with my iPhone and send it to myself and then clean it up in Photoshop and reassemble it. So Kindred is over 700 drawings, like actual drawings. I don't know how that Coke got into my house. I don't drink pop, but it was very useful for this particular thing. Yeah, you see, so that's Kindred right there. Yeah. Very, so I smartened up. Here's some of the process, like sketches. Like these are actually like about that big that I actually would then extrapolate into drawings, right? So I literally like, just card size, right? How am I doing? Yeah, okay, yeah. All right, you know what, I'm not gonna even talk about parables, so I want y'all to talk. Yeah, I have a whole nother thing to even talk about here. I have 2 books, it wasn't even fair. Okay. All right, I had no choice. But let me know if you want to. I'm gonna be like, here's a thing right here. It's like, see, look, this one right here. If you want to know about the script, there you go
John,
right there. Sorry.
We want to know everything. Let's take maybe 2 more minutes, and if you can speed through them.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
It's all about the medium itself, and it's just me
And
showing
they're
drawings.
both for sale in the back if you all would like to take a look yourselves. Now, John and Elizabeth, actually, maybe you can say how you know Queenie quite intimately, the book itself, and then launch into a discussion yourselves.
I was just talking about this too. That was a great segue. This is so good. So actually, my senior editor, Charlotte, who's in the back, sent me, she's so awesome, for real, sent me the first 28 pages of Queenie. And I was angry because I didn't have all of it. I was like, how you gonna just send me 28 pages of the book? It was amazing. I was like, oh my God. So Megascope is an imprint that I curate for Abrams Comic Arts. And we focus on speculative fiction by and about people of color, and also historical fiction and crime fiction too, because I like the murder stories. Are they good? Right? I like crime fiction. So anyway, this fit all of the things, right? And it was like not only had a speculative component to it as well, because if you've read the book, you see how well that that Elizabeth and Ariel actually utilized the comics medium for like storytelling, and I want to talk about that in a little bit. But also, it's a crime fiction piece, and it's also like a historical fiction piece about someone that I was familiar with, again, through Hoodlum. I know you mentioned it. Yeah, that's the first time I came across the Queen, right? And I was kind of fascinated by her. Played, even though it was a small part, was played very well by the late great Cicely Tyson, right? Even now, I mean, Bumpy Johnson's at the center of a TV show, right? It's
Called
Godfather
The Godfather
of
of Harlem.
Right, right. So, it's not fair that these particular narratives get erased, right? And I just commend you for the work that you've done, just not only in the graphic novel, but your work in general, as far as like.
Thank you.
Yeah, yes, gorgeous work. So,
Thank you.
so Charlotte asked us, did we want to pick it up for? What did I think about it? I was like, what do you mean? It's amazing. We should do this. Sign this immediately. And the reason being is because, it's so easy to fall into stereotypes around, representation of black people, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. The other thing is that you just won't, when people think about comics as a medium, a lot of times we see like the hypersexualization of women, we see the erasure of women, we see the depowering of women. And I was just really attracted to the story, and so I'm so grateful that we actually have Queenie on the imprint. And I thank you so much for your work, seriously.
Thank you.
So what was it that attracted you all to the comics medium? Like, why? I know that you're obviously an extremely talented painter. What is it about comics that you wanted to kind of delve into?
Well, I wanted to. So obviously, I was fascinated by the story of Stephen Clair, and my first instinct was to do what I do, which is do a painting of an old painting that could, give. I wanted to. Again, put her in the center of my story, and usually that's what I use as a medium. But the more I know about her, there was a richness and complexity that I don't know if I could convey into a painting. So, and I went to that show of Kerry James Marshall at the Met Breuer, and there was a retrospective, and in one of the rooms, you could see all his graphic novel, which called
Master Blaster?
Right, Rhythm Master.
Rhythm Master.
Rhythm Master.
Master Blaster is something totally different. That's a Stevie Wonder song.
Oh yeah,
Anyway.
it's a great song.
It is, actually.
And when I saw that obviously Kerry James Marshall is an incredible artist and fine art artist, I thought it was interesting that he was exploring another medium. And then I thought, well, maybe a graphic novel is a great medium, and not seeing it as a comic book, but seeing another way of expressing an idea. And obviously, being from Europe, graphic novel also has a different meaning to us. It's a way to just telling any story. So it is already a medium, and that's why I approach it. And I thought it was a good pairing, basically, because I could understand her complexity. Again, I could understand why she was. She came to New York. How she reinvented herself. I mean, she's very mysterious. You would see that she hid a lot of areas of her life. We know things, but we don't know. She more or less, 10 years. She lied about her age all the time. We don't know where she lied about where she lived. She, accentuated her French accent. She wanted people to know that she was coming from France. She was just like she was a lot. So she was inventing her myth as she was living, and I thought that was quite incredible.
First of all, I'm glad that you reference comics as a medium. In our country, a lot of times, because of the ubiquitous, kind of sometimes overbearing nature of superheroes, that we conflate or mix up the fact that superhero does not equal comics.
Right.
I like superheroes a lot, but because of the history of comics in our country, people still think of them as being for children, and also for just particular types of like funny animal stories, or men in tights beating up each other. great, but also it's a medium that, like any other medium, can tell any kind of story. Now, as far as like how you created the book, I was surprised to know that you actually did this digitally.
Yeah.
I thought it was
everything.
pen and ink. You
Nope.
know. So,
Nope.
what did you use, and how did you actually go about making it digitally? And why did you choose
Well,
digital?
it was interesting to see some of the pictures of your process, because I first once rewrote the story orally, so I had to break up the story, obviously, as you do when you do a graphic novel. And I did exactly that. I have like 3 notebooks where you break it up and you do really quick sketches.
Right.
And then I basically took those sketches, put them on my computer, and that's when I do cleaner sketches. And then I ink. But I use a software that I mentioned earlier called Clip Studio. And I'm kind of used to work digitally because I used to be a storyboard artist.
Oh, see, now it comes, okay. I
I
didn't
know.
know that about you, okay.
You see,
Yeah.
discovering new things.
All right. I see.
So approaching the graphic novel medium was not as scary, having that experience and working digitally before. But it was still scary in the sense, because I have so much respect for that medium. It was just very intimidating at first. So it took me, so I think I also needed those notebooks to be able to say, okay, I need to break it up the best way possible. And I read a lot of graphic novels. Because I wanted to do in black and white, I also wanted to read works that was done in black and white, mangas. You had this beautiful book of Campbell of Cold from Hell, which was,
Oh,
I know,
come on.
I know.
Y'all know From Hell? I mean, not, literally, but like the graphic
The
novel.
graphic novel is
Yeah, it's Campbell
extraordinary.
and Moore? Alan Moore?
Yeah.
It's a Jack the Ripper story. Never
Yeah.
mind. It's really good,
Beautiful.
but that big.
Yeah. And all that, so then I can, find inspiration in that as well. But yeah, I think it was pretty much, I'm quite impressed that you did everything with a Sharpie.
Don't do it. Do not try this at home. Yeah. Again, I was trying to find something that was difficult to work with. So I was really influenced by a lot of like fine artists, like particularly like Kathy Kollwitz in particular, just because she was an artist that dealt with the Holocaust a lot. So just trying to figure out ways to embody the trauma of slavery and death and
I was going to say,
Yeah.
do you feel like maybe the idea of laboring played into the part of choosing that medium or that tool because you wanted to kind of relate to the character in Kindred?
I definitely think so. And this is something I talk about a lot when we're talking about the adaptation of Kindred, is that in a story like this, in a story like Kindred, you are embodying the story as much as possible. Like Damian had to read it like many, many times to understand the intricacies of it. I would listen to it on audiobook as I drew. I actually visited slave plantations to get like, old slave plantations that are now museums, to actually like, get into the space, the headspace. My wife was like, hey, let's go to New Orleans. There's a slave plantation there. I was like, okay. Seriously. It was like, let's go and check it out. We went to one of my cousin's weddings. I said, oh, there happens to be a slave plantation. Oh, let's go check it out. Yeah. It's traumatic. It was very traumatic, man. Yeah, so like, whenever you are drawing it, kind of embodying it, and you're kind of re-traumatizing yourself over and over again. So the sketches, with every pass, you're trying to reify it and make it more and more real, right? And so, going from sketches to drawings to colors, you're trying to make it more like the thing, right? And found myself, it was very traumatizing, that particular story. And in fact, if you read the book, there's this part in the fire when Dana is witnessing one of her ancestors being whipped, and it's one of the best descriptions, of a whipping that you ever heard. It's harrowing, it's terrifying, it's beautifully told, as only someone like Octavia Butler could tell. And when I was drawing it, I found myself weeping onto like the original pages. It was just so moving. About to start crying now. Stop it. Okay. So it was so powerful that I actually like waited till the last minute to draw it. To finish it.
Yeah.
So I sketched it out, and I didn't want to.
Right.
Yeah, because you can draw stuff out of
Out of order.
Yeah. So yes, but it had something to do with labor. In fact, I actually messed up my show. I injured myself drawing Kendrick. I was drawing so fast, you know. It wasn't the drawing, it was the redesigning the pages. you know.
Yeah, repetition
like-
also.
Yeah. Yep.
I am your cue.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So if we can have just a round of applause for our presenters. Incredible. I'm actually going to start with a question, and then if you have a question, where's the mic? You should come up to the mic here so that the folks at home on live stream can hear you, and I will be your moderator. So again, thank you. I was really struck in both of your talks about the sense of responsibility that you had to these narratives. And because we're the Center for Black Visual Culture, that means a little something when you're different, when you're dealing in visual mediums. So, John, we've worked together.
Mhm.
John did the cover for the reissue for my book, so
One of
that
my
beautiful.
favorite covers.
Yes, and stressed about it in a way that no one has stressed about my work ever, just in wanting to get it right. So I know that is something that you definitely brought to the work with Octavia Butler. And Elizabeth, I'm so struck by your aesthetic choices, what you chose to dress Queenie in, her cheekbones, she's fly. And so I wanted to know if you could speak a bit about making those aesthetic choices in terms of your preservation of history and the storytelling.
Okay. You want to? Oh,
Either.
okay. First of all, thank you for the question. So one of the things that was really daunting is, you know, Beyonce fans are rabid and eager, right? But nothing like Octavia Butler fans. Oh my goodness. Whew. And being, you know, cis hetero black man, Damian Duffy is a cis hetero white man, right? We actually had a lot of burden on us to make sure that what we were doing was in collaboration with Octavia Butler. She's our third writer, right? We're in collaboration with her story. So one of the reasons that we're trying to imbibe the story is trying to make sure, like you said, to get it right, you know, knowing that, you know, the outcome could be catastrophic. What I have to say, though, is that we worked really hard on a piece, put together a really strong creative team, and then once we sent it to the estate, they had no changes.
Oh, wow.
Not a one.
Amazing.
Not a one. And I was like, I've worked as you know, as a graphic designer for a long time. People always have, you had
Always.
changes. You know what I'm saying? Like, just a little bit, not a lot. You know, she's like, oh, I didn't mean it. But you know, it's the truth, right? You want to make sure. But for someone to say like, this is kindred, oh man, it was a weight off our shoulders. So yes, the idea of working with Octavia Estelle Butler's work is a great honor, but it also is a great responsibility because of what she means to our community. So.
Yeah. The choices of Stephanie, so there's very few photographs of her. So I decided to pick one of my friends. Her name is Jani Kuji, and she was the model for Stephanie. And she's from Martinique, and she also lives in Harlem. And I thought she was almost the embodiment of Stephanie St. Clair today. I felt like she had the same type of, you know, character, ambition. I think she was like almost the essence of Stephanie St. Clair. And when I asked her to pose for me, she said, yes, I will, of course, absolutely. And you mentioned fashion of Stephanie. It was very important for me to dress her not only as a woman of her time, but a woman of time who has the means to dress in a particular way. So I refer to a lot of couture in the book. I also refer to Chanel. I mean, you can see here, this is how Chanel would dress
She's
at
fly.
the time, I know, right? And I wanted people to see that she had the money to buy that or to make it happen. And because for her, it was exuding power, exuding wealth, and to make her community understand that she's there for them and she have the power to help them. So, yeah.
So I have two questions that kind of relate to the idea of research. It's really exciting to see, of course, Cotton Club, car. So I think about Vanderzee's, right,
Yes,
that
yes.
image.
Definitely.
And the
Yes.
woman is standing outside the car.
Yes.
So I always felt that she was in control of that image. So I was curious, did you use any Vanderzee images
100%.
to work with this narrative? So my other question in relating to, I find it fascinating how you created a narrative through images, and you created a visual narrative through text, and how you both imagine this story. My question is, how did you present to the publisher to believe in the fact that these two stories were significant to be a part of the publishing world, and their readers will be excited about accepting it?
Well, so the graphic novel was first published in France. And before I did 5 pages and presenting them to the publisher. And the 5 pages were that's a scene where she goes down south, and the bus is being stopped, and it's being stopped by the Ku Klux Klan. KKK, yeah, the KKK. And it's a bit of a traumatizing scene. It was not, super fun to draw, but it's incredibly powerful. And when he first saw that, and he understood who she was, also that she was this woman who overcame the type of experiences and still managed to land where she was, he was already fascinated. So on that spec of 5 pages, he decided we need to publish this. It's an important story to tell. And then here, as John mentioned, it was really thanks to him that Queenie was published here. Absolutely.
Well, it was definitely an honor to have it. So thank you so much for the work on it. It's beautiful, beautiful book.
Thank you.
Very powerful. For us, actually, it was kind of accidental. So Damian and I had actually lost the opportunity to publish it before. Beacon Press was actually trying to publish Kindred as a graphic novel, and we tried to get it, and we couldn't. It went to someone else, And so it was like, okay, well, we tried to win the publication, and it wasn't ours at the time, but it kind of circled back to us. It's odd. So Damian and I were speaking about another book we had done together, Black Comics. It was a curatorial piece on comics and sequential art, and we're speaking at San Diego Comic-Con. And so Damian was like in the air. He was on his way to San Diego. I was already there, and I was trying to show some work that I was, some other projects we were doing. And at the time, the great Sheila Keenan was actually senior editor at Abrams, and I showed her some of my work. She liked it, and she said, "Hey, are you familiar with Octavia Butler?" And I'm like, "Why, yes, I am. Yes, I am, very much so." And she's like, she was trying to do a book, and I was like, "Well, which book are you doing?" And she was like, "Kindred." And I was like, "Kindred? Wait," and then I remembered that the other book never happened for some reason, right? And so so she thought that I would be good for the book, and told Damian it was an opportunity for us to maybe do this book together. And we kept seeing her over that weekend too. It was almost like this kind of omen, And then 5 months later, we were signing contracts to do the book, So it was not like we had an opportunity to do it, and we took advantage of it, and it worked out, And so we didn't pitch the idea, It came to us, because it wasn't ours the first time, but it was ours the second time. So.
We're just laughing because there's a little whispering between Deb and I had no idea about the story between you two and this book.
Oh, really?
But not at all. Like, I just was like, they should talk.
We should talk about, yeah.
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, really?
Idea at all.
No.
I was like, Deb, did you know? She's like,
No. Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's my,
Yeah.
that's my, that's my imprint. Yeah.
I know.
We were just talking before about how the universe always just worked things out.
Yeah. It kind of worked out, right?
Yeah, it really did. We're so happy to have you here. Are there any other questions? We have time for a couple. Come on up if you are able, or I
How
can
you
come
gonna-
to you.
I love
We
her
have a
so
couple
much.
time for a
She's
couple
my
more
former
questions and one
student.
online. So
How you doing? I miss you so much. This is what my former students are like.
I am a former student of his. Hello.
How you doing?
Yeah. Where do I even start? One, thank you both for being here in this space and blessing us with your presence, especially the day before the end of Black History Month. So there's that. And I think one question that's been eating me away as a writer and a storyteller, poet, artist, and everything, how did you find that discipline and that balance between the speculative and like the information? Because I think of the essay Venus in Two Acts by Sadia Hartman and her trying to find that balance using the archive and her own speculative practice. So was that working for you in like the graphic novel sense? Like, did you feel like you guys were like lost in it in your own brain, or like lost in the history, lost in the research? Yeah, I just really want to know like what's that like for both of you. So
You can go first.
yeah.
I know. Complex.
It's my student.
I feel like you do get lost because I mean there's so many anecdotes you want to put in the story and you don't get to because you have to serve the character, but also you want to make an interesting story. You want it to be a page turner. So something you have to sacrifice. For example, we found out that Ella Fitzgerald was a runner for somebody at somebody in Harlem when she came to Harlem before she was discovered the Apollo, and we're like, oh my God, this is great, we need to put it, but there was no way to put that information. So we find incredible nuggets that are not serving the story we want to tell. It's just for our own pleasure, and sometimes you just have to chop it. Yeah. But you get lost in the research because you relinquish in the research. You find so many things that are interesting and you want to share it with everybody, but sometimes you just have to do what's best for the project.
That's well said. I was thinking about, you mentioned Sadia Hartman's work. Of course, one of my favorite constructs that she deals with is the idea of critical fabulation, that the idea that connecting the dots, sometimes you have to create a story or like a narrative to kind of connect things. You know it's there, but because of the nature of what it means to be Black in this space, it's been disrupted or erased even, And so you actually have to utilize storytelling to connect the dots. Man, Sadia is a brilliant, brilliant woman. Oh my goodness. I mean, and I didn't know that I was doing that. So that's what I'm doing, critical fabulation. So we did a lot of research, as far as I bought so many books on like the styles. For instance, Kindred takes place not during the antebellum period. It takes place during the Regency era, right? Totally different lapels, everything, right? Lack of facial hair, all these different styles that they were doing that had to be researched. A lot of stuff doesn't make its way into the story, A lot of it you can't put everything in, right? But what you do is you kind of embody it. It's in your back of your mind, and you try to make it as natural and as organic as possible. The other thing is that what you all did was much difficult, because you had much more heavy lifting to create that narrative, whereas we had a collaborator and a roadmap, so to speak.
Right.
Now, one thing I do want to say is that, and this is something that y'all did really well too, is I feel that comics have an inherently surreal quality to them, because everything on the page is a storytelling mechanism. So that means the line weight of that you choose for the borders, the typeface choice, the layout, everything is a vehicle for telling a story, right? And and you have different, and that's part of the affordances of comics. But one thing it's also really good at is diagrams and showing cutaways and things that usually in a narrative would actually take someone out of the narrative.
Right.
But because comics speak symbolically, you can show the inside of a house. You can show in the middle of a story a
Right.
pie, literally a pie, right?
Exactly.
Without
Yeah.
taking someone out of the story.
Right.
You can show a diagram. You can actually utilize the metaphor of Monopoly,
Right.
That kind of thing. We actually did the same thing. When Dana would travel, she would pack up a bag. So we actually showed the contents of the bag. So that was a way for us to kind of deal with the kind of mutability of the surreal quality of comics, but also think about the content of what those symbols mean, And that's one particular way, But Man, that was a great question. So proud of you, by the way. Really proud.
Hi, I had a question. I had two questions. I love graphic novels. I had a bunch in college, and I can't even think of the names of any of them, but they
Bless
were
you.
all about like white men being superheroes, superheroes in real life. They were interesting, but I've never seen black characters in a graphic novel. So I wanted to ask you a question, because one of the reasons why I like them so much is how you have the agency as an artist to create bodies, like literally physical bodies in your own eyes. What is the potential for reasserting the black body within the context of like Queenie or Kindred, for example, in a way more expansive way than visual film, for example, can do? Do you think about that when you're creating black bodies in terms of like walking the line of like surrealism and sci-fi and being really creative with what our black bodies can be? Like, I don't know if you've ever seen any of Arthur Jafer's writings. Like, he talks about like how black folks are aliens, really. He's straight up dead serious about that. So I think about how we could reassert it visually with you have the actual opportunity and the agency to do that and the creativity. And the second question, I was 10 minutes late, so you might have answered that. Why'd you do black and white?
Oh, okay. So I'm going to answer the second question first.
There you go.
The black and white, I think there is something, is just visually interesting. There's something that there's no forgiveness in the black and white.
Get out of my head. I was thinking something there.
Right?
Yeah, you can't cover it up.
You can't cover it up. And I also wanted this visual work to work very differently from my paintings. Because my paintings are very classical, very detailed, and it's a different medium, and I wanted to treat it differently. So that's why I chose the black and white. And also I think I like the symbolism of black and white, literally, of like seeing black folks in black and white. I thought it was interesting politically. I do not remember your first question.
It's about embodiment.
Oh,
It was about the affordances of comics over like other mediums.
And the black body representation. My whole practice is around the black body and how it is shown and must be shown differently. A lot of it also centers around the women, the black body of black women. And because of the era I'm interested in, which is more classical, I would say, representational work from, let's say, 17th century to end of 19th century. When you see black women, they're either eroticized or sexualized, and all that is not in my practice. So just the way to approach the body is different. So when I represent it as a person. It doesn't have to be sexualized or pleased to somebody else's gaze. It's just for the black woman.
Have you been to the Schaumburg Black Comic Book Festival? The Black Comic Book Festival?
Yes.
Okay, so you have seen some black comic books. Okay, I was like,
Recently, but to me, that was just 3 years ago. Like, I've been out of college for more than 20 years.
okay. I was gonna say, so there's an entire, just so if y'all don't know, there's an entire like practice of, independent black Afrocentric comic books that are independent. We're talking about outside of Black Panther, that are outside of the Falcon, Black Lightning, that are about the entire diaspora. Now, one of the things that we're trying to do at Megascope is to open up those doors. The term Megascope came from a W.E.B. Du Bois science fiction story called The Princess Steel. And in it, he created this device that could see through time and space and other dimensions. This was written in 1909, 20 years before science fiction as a term was coined. So we've always been speculating about other places, other ways of being, And the comics, oh man, they're such a powerful medium, right? Because you're merging these symbolic ideas around like text and image in a very, very powerful, very deliberate way. And as you stated too, it is an unforgiving medium, It is. You have to sit down there, and you have to imagine that space, and then it's very laborious, tedious even, right? But at the end of the day, you come up with this amazing, moving piece that I think is something that's very enticing to me. I've been in love with comics since I felt like all my life, And I think that there's something to be said about like empowerment through that space. It's something that's extreme, like you said, surreal. Also too, by the way, Arthur Jafer, His brother, one of his younger brothers is named Tim Fielder, who is a graphic novelist. He has a wonderful book out called Infinitum. Yep. That is an Afrofuturist masterpiece, I feel. So, there's a spectrum of representation that's out there now. We live in a very different era. In some ways, it might be a golden age of representation in comics from, say, like the independent, like Kickstarter comics, all the way up to the big two, so to speak, right? So.
So I just want to thank you. Had one online. Yeah. Yeah. Can you want to do that? Just curious if it's.
So we did have an online question. I think it was actually a follow-up to the previous one. It's from While We Are Still Here, Preserving Edgecombe Avenue. Very important username. The question is, was the Charles Alston, Myra Logan rent party scene imagined, real, or something in between?
It was imagined, but rent parties were something of the time. And I actually went to a rent party when I first moved to Harlem, which right? And it was incredible because I was not living in Harlem. I was looking for an apartment, and I was like, I don't know if I want to live in Harlem because I had all these 70s movies in my head being French. And I thought, oh my God, it's going to be so dangerous. And then I went to, a friend took me to a rent party in Harlem, and it was incredible. It was on 150th, actually, on Edgecombe Avenue, believe it or not. And it was just beautiful to be in the room. It was an apartment, and you had a band there, and everybody can go there and sing or play. And you had cakes passing around, orange juice. You were giving a little bit of money. It was an incredible experience. And from that moment on, I said, well, I guess I'm going to live in Harlem. It was really something. So, no, it didn't happen, but I think it could have happened because Charles Alston obviously was a painter, was somebody who was struggling. Well, now we know about him, but at the time it was, I'm sure, very difficult. So I thought it was a good way to introduce what was a rent party.
Just quickly to Elizabeth, I want to thank you for your attention to positioning her as a global Black citizen, as a Jamaican woman, a Caribbean American woman. I'm very grateful to see that history balanced, and that I love the idea of the kind of grayscale.
Right.
We really do not have enough of that. Often what happens, people forget how diasporic and simultaneously cosmopolitan that Harlem's history is.
Yes.
And so it's really satisfying to see her positioned that way. And yeah, I lived at 555 Edgecombe and absolutely had rent parties. So.
Got too many microphones. Just that first part of Joan's comment for the live stream, because I think that was really important. You positioned her as a global Black citizen, somebody who had traveled, who's from many different diasporas, locations in the diaspora. So gratitude for that. Also, Tim Fielder is on the stream and says, "Stop it." Hey,
sorry.
Tim from Joan.
I'm sorry. I love him. Tell him I love him. Type I love you, Tim.
I'm not going to type I love you, Tim, but you can tell him later.
I didn't mean to literally,
It's being broadcast.
It's like
We are so grateful for you all. This is everything. My mind is spinning speculative. We mentioned Miss Saidia Hartman. This is just everything. If you have more questions, please email my email, kira.williams@nyu.edu. That's KIRA, and I will pass them along. If they have, answers to them, we'll get them back to you. So thank you. There will be a book signing right here, so you're welcome to go and buy your book and then come here. They have their Sharpies ready. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Hello. So we signing up here?
Yeah.
Okay.